Upper Echelon is brought to you by Deloitte for innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning. Turn to Deloitte. Sizwe Nxasana, the Chief Executive of First Rand, is in our focus in Upper Echelon today. And Sizwe, I was going through my notes. We had an interview on the old Upper Echelon exactly 10 years ago, can you believe?
Oh, really? Already?
And things have really developed since then. You've been shooting the lights out, going from the early days of your involvement back then. It was at Telecom. Now you're back in the financial services sector. Was there ever a chance that Telecom was going to be, or the telecommunications was going to grab your heart?
Yes, there was a chance because it is an industry which is really interesting. It is dynamic. It changes all the time. And technology drives a lot of things that we do. And I did think, I was going to spend a bit more time there. But of course, when I got the opportunity to go to First Rand, realized that there is a component within the banking industry, in fact, which deals a lot with technology as well. So I wasn't completely lost to the telecoms industry.
How life might have been different had you stayed with Telecom?
I wasn't going to stay with Telecom for more than 10 years. I always believe that, especially if you are a CEO of an organization, it is important for your own personal growth as well as the growth of the organization to move. And I think 10 years max is just about the right time to be in one organization. So there was no way I was going to be in Telecom more than 8 years. In fact, I was there for 8 years. But, for me, it just felt right that it was the time to move on.
Are you giving us a tip now that you're looking to move on from First Rand?
Well, I've been in the current position for only just over 2 years. And clearly I've been with First Rand for an additional 3 years before that. That therefore gives me about 5 years. And yes, I think in a number of years, I'm not sure exactly when. It depends clearly, on a number of things, including whether or not I will continue having fun a couple of years' time from now, which at the moment I'm having absolute fun. And also, the direction that the organization may be going at that stage. But, I do intend not to stay for more than 10 years since I took over as the group CEO.
So there's still a long way to go. Nobody needs to get nervous at First Rand just yet. But interesting you make that point, because in 6 years' time, you'll be 60. And Eugene Meyer, a former governor of the Federal Reserve in America and the father of the Iron Lady of the Washington Post, you might remember that she was the lady who brought down the whole Watergate affair, Catherine Graham. He said that people learn from 20 to 40, earn from 40 to 60, and serve from 60 onwards. Is that what you have in mind, to serve perhaps more in the national interest thereafter?
I do serve even right now. I think it's something that we all have to do, especially if we occupy privileged positions of being on top of organizations. And clearly, as I retire from First Rand one day, I do hope that I will give some more back because of the experience that I would have had. But I do not see myself retiring in the classical sense. In other words, I will probably be involved in business for many years to come. I may split my time slightly differently from how I work today, but I don't really see myself slowing down that much, to be honest.
When I say serving, more from a national perspective, have you ever thought of politics one day as being a possibility?
Not at all. Complicated as it is, I don't think it's an environment that I would really like to see myself in. I think it is important that I interact with politics and make a contribution to the extent that I can, which is something that I do even today, but not being a politician itself. And I don't think I will ever be a politician as such.
The contribution that you're making to this society as well is in many ways not quite recognized. I was digging around on the internet and found a website with your family history. Sizwe, to go back 400 years in your family is quite an eye-opener, given that so much of those records weren't written down back in those days. If only we could have more families doing this kind of thing. But what motivated you?
Well, I guess it was a journey of self-discovery, of really being curious about our roots and our family. And I was very fortunate, in fact, when we were putting this together with our family, that we still have, and at that stage when we wrote it, which is about 3 years ago now, had a number of people within the family who knew the history of the family quite intimately. And some of them have since passed on. And we thought it was important, especially for the young generation, to understand their roots, but even for ourselves to understand where we come from. And, digging and looking through information, we're very fortunate to find through the archives of the University of KwaZulu-Natal some of the information which made reference to our family, in fact, which went back to the 1600s, which is where the 400 plus years come from.
It's a fascinating tale, and I would recommend anybody to go and read that and see perhaps an alternative history to the one that was propagated in this country for many, many years.
Yeah, I think it's something that I guess all families go through now and again. I've come across a number of people who've looked at our website, our family website, and they've been inspired by it, and they've started, doing something similar. And I think it is really important for all of us to have some point of reference. And we've learned a lot from our forefathers and what they did, and the challenges that they faced, but also just how they operated, including just some of the entrepreneurial roots that we come from, which are important for inspiring some of our young people.
Well, the inspirational issue must be forefront in your mind so often, because for many you're a role model. Do you find that a little pressurized at times?
Not at all. Clearly, I live my life and have a very wonderful life, a very full life, really. And I try and do whatever I do the best I can. And if that does inspire other people, that's well and good. So I don't really feel a lot of pressure, because it's nothing that I do that feels remote and feels not sort of genuine. It's things that I just do because this is how I live my life.
Your colleague Larry Dippenaar has got again under the radar, a trust fund where he's helping a lot of people to improve themselves. A lot of young people, he spends time with them. Are you doing something similar?
Yes, we do a number of things as a family. For instance, if you go through the history that you referred to earlier, we have a family farm in Ikopo, which has been within the family since 1892. And on that farm, my grandfather had built a school. And that school had become dilapidated over time, so we've worked with the government to rebuild the school. And in fact, it was officially opened a month ago. It now has capacity to teach about 700, primary school children. And we do quite a lot of things at the school. So I communicate with the school almost on a weekly basis, just in terms of providing support, direction, and other things that the school requires. But there are other things as well in which I'm involved. If you look at my extramural activities, they have a lot to do with education. I'm the chairman of the Tutuga Bursary Fund, which is an initiative which was started by the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, which in fact is quite successful in training young would-be chartered accountants, mainly kids coming from the rural areas. And it's a very important initiative, and it's actually become a flagship for a number of universities, and there are 8 universities that are involved in the initiative. And government also, through the Department of Higher Education, has recognized it as best practice in terms of how you train professionals. So I'm involved with that.
There's so much that you're doing, and again, so much that isn't highlighted in the public domain. And I refer you to a discussion that I had with Herman Mashaba a couple of weeks ago, where he said he feels that business is losing the battle for the hearts and minds of the young people. He feels that when you are listening to the media and somebody from Labour talks, they're the good guys and the business are the bad guys. How can this be addressed? How can more of a balance be provided? Because if you don't have people like yourself, if you don't have entrepreneurs, you won't have jobs.
I think it is an issue that business as a whole and business people need to address, which is a question of how we effectively communicate what we do. But we must also recognize that in an environment and in a society such as ours, where you have large gaps between the haves and the have-nots, sometimes it does feel for a lot of poor people and maybe even young people who may be unemployed. And as we know, I mean, we have about 46% unemployment, which is affecting the youth. It does mean that for a lot of those people, whatever business does is not enough because they just still feel that their lot has not improved. And it is important in that regard that business continues to communicate what they do quite effectively. And sometimes I think what you do find is that business communicates to itself. In other words, you'll find reports in the financial media as an example. But, those people who are out in the townships, who are unemployed, do not read financial media. So we need to find effective platforms and mediums to communicate with a lot of those people. And it's a challenge that I think has been recognized by a lot of business people.
Your life is an example of discipline, of focus, of hard work, of all of those old-fashioned ethics and values that our parents and maybe our grandparents used to teach us about. It is something that doesn't seem to be that prevalent in society as a whole today, and particularly not amongst the young people.
I would disagree slightly because I just take the example of the students that I was talking about, the Tutuga students. We select students that have potential, that come from obviously very poor backgrounds and with very poor education, but they have potential. And one of the things that we emphasize in the program, and we now have about 975 students in the program, is that they must understand that we are trying to address in a 3-year undergraduate degree the gaps that have existed, in fact, ever since they started schooling. So you're trying to address in 3 years the gaps that have been left by 13 years of poor education. And therefore that they need to work hard. And they sign up to this working hard. And for instance, on Fridays, when other students are busy partying and so on, these students are writing tests and they're doing tutorials and so on. So it's about increasing the time on task so that they can increase their chances of success. And as I said, out of the 975 students that we've got, almost all of them work extremely hard. So I think given a chance and given the right kind of direction and motivation, young people can and do work hard. Maybe not in the same way as our generation, and I come from the baby boomers generation, work. I look at my children. They work very hard, but they work very differently from how I work. They lack their flexibility. They work when they feel, they work. They don't want rigid, for instance, hours that may be imposed by companies and so on. So it's a different way of working hard. And sometimes we as the more senior generation need to understand what drives young people and try and adapt the work environment, as an example, to cater for the needs of the young people.
That's a message of great hope and one that we don't hear too often. So you're excited about the young South Africans?
Absolutely. I just had an occasion and a privilege last week to address a whole number. There were more than 300 students at the University of Johannesburg. And I do this quite often at different campuses as well. And each time I finish interacting with young people, I never stop to be amazed about, the talent that we have in different campuses, in fact, in the country, which gives me a lot of hope for our future.
I must agree with you. Certainly when I have that opportunity as well to engage with young people at but primarily some of the better schools, it blows you away. We've got a great future. And I suppose, Sizwe, when looking back on your life, it wasn't that easy when you were coming through Fort Hare University, apartheid era, being a chartered accountant, when it wasn't easy being a black man to achieve that.
I didn't know any different. So in that regard, yes, when I look back now, it does look like it was very difficult, but because I was in it at the moment, at the time, I didn't really see that it was that difficult. And I guess a lot has changed since then. And I was very fortunate in that, in my university education as well as when I started work, got a lot of support from a number of people. So my success was because of a number of other people who supported me. And there were people who inspired me as well. So, which is why it's important to have role models in life, to have people that you look up to, because they can make life a little easier in terms of meeting some of the challenges that all of us meet from time to time.
I'd love to know how you manage the work-life balance with your wife, Judy Dlamini, who's also an entrepreneur and a very successful one as well. Do you guys just talk business 24/7 in your home?
No, we have a very full life, and it helps actually that we are both as busy as we are. We talk about politics, we talk about business, we talk about our children, we talk about society generally, we talk about some of the initiatives that we have together. So we have absolutely a very rich life.
And First Rand, the way it's positioned for the future, you're comfortable that you're going to be able to make a major contribution there to society and, in fact, to perhaps the continent as well going ahead?
We understand that the role of business is not just to make a profit and return dividends to our shareholders, that we have a broader mandate to look after our broader stakeholders so that we can create an environment or make a contribution in creating an environment which is sustainable, which is why, even beyond just some of the things that we are required to do, for instance, in terms of the Financial Sector Charter, we go well beyond that in addressing the challenges that particularly this country faces. But the same applies to all other jurisdictions in which we operate. We try and make a contribution in uplifting society generally, whilst at the same time it is important to be successful as a business and make a profit. And if you look at this country as an example, we are involved in a number of things, mainly in education, because we believe education can change the lot of a lot of people who may not have an opportunity right now. But beyond that, there are certain things that are part of the business that we do that are important for society and for the development of this country as well as the other markets in which we operate. For instance, providing access to those people who may not have access to financial services is a very important issue, because not only does it grow our business, but it also makes sure that we have a society which can have some of the privileges that may not have been available to them in the past.
So as you look ahead to the years beyond First Rand, to 8 years plus into the future, are you going to go home to Crichton? Are you going back to the family home?
Not really, but even though I do go back there on a very regular basis, I probably go to Crichton and Klopo at least once every 2 months, just to make sure that, for instance, we have a school and we're looking at a community center and so on. And there are a number of things. We have a number of families that live on the family farm there. But I think the fact of the matter is I think there are more opportunities for me to make a contribution in urban areas particularly, or operating from urban areas, because as I said earlier, I still see myself continuing to work for many years to come. So it may be very difficult for me to operate from that environment. I know you have managed to do that very well on your side. I'm not sure how you actually do it. So I do see myself operating from Johannesburg from many years, even though I may go to Durban and I may go down to Crichton. But yes, I think the platform will be the Johannesburg platform.
We look forward to following your career, and perhaps in 10 years' time we'll have another discussion in our Upper Echelon program. Sizwe Nxasana, the Chief Executive of First Rand.
Thank you.
Upper Echelon was brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte.